It's Mr. Smith. So we're not having Zoom today because of the PSAT. So I'm going to walk you through the Tuesday folder and Tuesday's notes in a rather quick but still understandable way. You can always go back and rewatch this video. You can go back and check whatever it is you need. I'm putting it up on my YouTube channel where you can find a lot of videos that will help cover the day's notes or whatever it is that we cover in class, or in some cases, how to do certain assignments. So I'm here to help you. So let's go ahead and get into that. So looking up at the agenda, we have no Zoom. Watch the video of me going over the notes instead, which is this video, how meta. We have a warm-up today. We're going to listen to part 2 of the slides on interpersonal communication. We can read through if we need any clarification, and then we will submit a question or topic for Topic Tuesday for Friday, but that is optional. So I will go ahead and put that that's optional later on after I'm done recording. But let's look at the warm-up first. Today, as we talk about selective perception, we realize that we cannot know everything, which truly hurts me. Many of you mentioned yesterday that you would do anything for your family, but outside of that, are there any problems in the world, society that you really pay attention to? If not, is there something that you wish you paid more attention to? I mentioned this in my bag speech. Of course, I pay attention to racial justice in America, and especially how to go about solving it properly. So that is one thing that I definitely do focus on, and I do pay a lot of attention to that. So selective perception, if there's something in the news about it, I tend to really, really try to understand all sides of the situation and figure out how to have the best informed opinion on that. Because, you know, being half black, that is one thing that is part of my reality, which we're going to get into in today's notes, which is the reason why I mention it. But that is something that I do need to follow because it is something that is very important to me because it's very relevant to me. So at some point, make sure you guys interact with this warm-up somewhere or somehow. And then from there, the next thing that we're going to get into are the notes. How exciting. So get your notes ready. You can pause the video if you need it. So we're looking at interpersonal communication, part 2. So let me go ahead and make it full screen. Okay, so yesterday we talked about self-talk and how powerful our inner voice is. We talked about how that can control our overall perception of self and how our inner voice can frame how we view things and how we act in certain situations. We're going to get into more detail with that today, and we're really going to talk about selective perception and the ability that not everyone is the same because we don't all perceive the world the exact same way, and we all also don't pay attention to the exact same thing. So as we get into that, let's go ahead and get started. Selective perception. This is the mental process of deciding what, I don't know, I turned the camera off. So this is the mental process of deciding what to pay attention to. Factors that influence this are intensity, repetition, uniqueness, and relevance. So in terms of paying attention to certain things, let's just talk about noise in general, or sounds, hearing things. Intensity. If you hear something that you're not normally used to hearing, so for example, if you hear a loud crash outside of the hallway, if you were in school, then that's not something that you're used to hearing. The bell, though, is something you're used to hearing. Police sirens, depending on where you live, is something you're used to hearing. Fire trucks, again, depending on where you live, is something you're used to hearing. So when it comes to that, even though it's an intense sound, it's something that we're used to hearing. And so because we see here with the repetition and the uniqueness, that's going to play a part into how our selective perception works. So really, really intense sounds are ones that we're going to be likely to listen to. An explosion, someone shouting at us, a very, very specifically emotionally charged message, we are more likely to listen to that. If someone confesses their love to you, that's not something that happens every day. It's a very intense thing to hear. So that is an example of something that you wouldn't normally pay attention to, but you're paying attention to it now. Then we have repetition. When you hear a song you really like the first time, you're like, oh man, that's awesome. And then you continue to listen to it. And as you listen to it, you might even pay more attention to it. But also, like it does happen, when you're hearing something over and over and over and over again, it might not be the same way, or it might not be as important to you. So the more that something is repeated, it has the tendency to not really be paid attention to that much. So again, the bell, no one really thinks about it, but you hear the bell, you know to move on. So it's something that you're used to. It's something that we all experience. It's not unique, which takes us to our next bullet point, the uniqueness of the noise. So if it's something that you're not used to hearing, then you're more likely to pay attention to it. If it's something that you do listen to quite a bit, it's not going to be something that you that you really pay attention to. And then, of course, relevance, things that relate to you. If something is happening inside of the school and there's a noise or something that you hear or something that is about school, you're probably going to pay attention to it. If there's something happening on the baseball team or the basketball team or the football team, that is relevant to you. So you'll pay attention to those messages and you'll pay attention to that world. Most people that play football will watch football on TV. Okay, since it is relevant to them, they have that adding to their selective perception. But since we can't pay attention to everything, since everything isn't always unique to us, since we do tend to listen to things that are repeated, and we listen to a very intense and non-intense things, it's very difficult to find someone that has the exact same self-perception as you. Next slide, developing selective perception to figure out how you can work on your own. This is the process of making a decision to pay attention to specific items and not paying attention to others. You do this by staying alert, making conscious choices about what is or what is not important, screen out noise or distractions that may break your concentration, monitor the process above, and make changes when needed. Okay, so this works for not just making sure you're paying attention to something by listening, but just in general, as a good student, make conscious choices about what is and what is not important. It's important to make sure you get your warm-ups done, so that way you can get a good grade on it. Make sure you do the warm-ups. It's also important to make sure that you're prepared for class. It's not important to just play video games all day because you can do that whenever you want. Okay. Now, when it comes down to making those decisions, not everyone makes the right decision. Not everyone pays attention to the exact same thing in the best way possible. So that is something that we have to kind of keep in mind. But this is a good way to develop your selective perception. So you can always go back to look at this if you need some advice. Now, I talked about personal perception with yesterday's community clip, which you can find in yesterday's folder if you would like to look at it, because it's a really good example of someone with good personal perception, because that's how you perceive reality. Okay, so your own understanding of reality is based on your values, what you think is right, wrong, good, bad. Beliefs, what you believe to be true, can be backed up with definite knowledge, definite logic, or definite feeling in certain instances. Culture. Not just race, not just country, but also Warren's school culture. You might be on a team, you might be in an organization, you might be on some sort of group, but every single group has their own culture that goes with it. Now, bias and prejudice are two separate ones because prejudice is prejudging something and bias is kind of what you prefer. So, for example, I am biased towards Apple products because I've had an iPhone since I was 18. Yes, I know that Samsung mostly does a lot of things better than Apple, but I'm biased towards that because all my stuff is on Apple, so I have a bias towards it. Now, prejudice, though, is me prejudging something. Now, remember, prejudice, just like stereotypes, does not always have to be a bad thing. So, for example, I might prejudge students based on who they're related to. So I know I have plenty of students that are related to other students that I've taught. So I have a good idea as to how they're going to act or how they might respond to certain things. So me prejudging someone, it usually is not good, but it is part of my perception of reality. Just because I'm prejudging something doesn't mean that I can't change. I can change my prejudices when I have new information, which kind of goes back to the selective perception in the earlier slide. Attitudes, how we feel about certain things, like just like general attitudes, emotions. I'm a generally happy person. I'm pretty I like to think that I'm funny. I like to think that I'm introspective. I like to think about a lot of things before I say them. And so those are my kind of general attitudes. And then I have attitudes towards learning, towards media, towards politics, towards food, all of those things. I have certain attitudes and prejudice and biases about all of those things. Expectations, what I expect out of life and what I expect out of people, what I expect out of situations. We have those. Knowledge, what you know, literally. And then communication skills, based on how I communicate with the world and how I communicate with others. That does understand my perception of reality. Since I'm a communication teacher, I truly believe that if you can communicate with someone and you can understand them, then that helps you better understand the world. So the better that we can understand ourselves and each other, the better that the world will be. We can solve problems by coming together and collaborating and figuring out how we want to make things work. So that's going to be it for the notes. Just to make sure, if you need to go over the paper copy, remember that they are here in Google Doc form. And you can look at them if you would like to. And it covers everything on a nice little slide. And then we have our topic Tuesday number 2. We're going to have a forum on Friday, so feel free to drop your topics. I had some funny things that kind of came up in some Zooms. throughout the day. But yeah, we'll have our forum on Friday, so feel free to discuss or post your topics. But that's going to be it for today, guys. Yes, sirs, in the chat if you understand, even though you can't put it in a YouTube video. I guess you technically could, but don't leave any comments on this. Either way, enjoy your day. Take care of yourselves. Get some work done. I'll see you on Wednesday for early release.